if someone was composing a piece for the steel guitar, what would you want to tell them?
Uh, that it's difficult. Um, and I'm not any expert at this, but I have a little bit of experience. Jeff Snyder wrote, who's also a pedal steel player, um, wrote a thing for steel guitar and string trio, string quartet, Substratum, which was the most difficult thing I have ever played. And it's on YouTube if anybody wants to pain themselves to hear it. But when we first started that conversation about writing this piece, and that piece was intense, and I said, well, just pretend it's a piano, although I can't, there's certain things you can't do, like, piano can do this, and we can't. Um, and so when he wrote it, it was just like incredibly difficult because, piano is no big deal. Anybody who's taken piano lessons for 4 years can do that, and guitar players do. But for me, it was difficult. And I was so stubborn that I was like, well, I'm going to learn this. I'm going to get to do. And so it was a learning experience. So for me, and I think for all of us, each time having someone else write music for you is a learning experience because you're out of your comfort zone. Most steel guitar players I know, most music written for for pedal steel guitar, maybe almost all of it is written by the musician himself or herself for them to play, including me. That's what I do. I write what I can do. Um, and the advice that I gave him. Well, let me back up a little bit. So when you're dealing with the steel guitar, you're dealing with a couple different things. Number one, you're dealing with the ability levels of the steel guitar players themselves. There are a lot of people who've sort of taken up the steel guitar later in life and are interested in all kinds of music, which is really incredible. Um, then the other side, you have all these people like in Nashville who've been playing since they were 8 years old, some of them, and can play anything. They're total virtuosos, but they're in a very narrow thing, and they for one reason or another, they can't seem to get out of it.
Mm.
So um, obviously, if you're going to compose something difficult, you're gonna have to find somebody who can play that. Another thing to keep in mind is the style of music and the copedance. And the copedant, I guess, is the big word for this thing, because for those who are unaware with the pedal steel, copedon is how your tuning, the how you tune your strings and your pedal setup, which pedals change the pitch on different strings. And there's quite a wide variety in copedons. Um, the most popular is probably what they call the E ninth chromatic or the E ninth commercial tuning, which is what you hear on all the country tunes and a lot of Americana kind of stuff. And when you hear, I don't know, in the background of some Pink Floyd song or whatever, it's probably E9th. Um, the good thing about E9th is it's a very simple setup, not easy to play, of course, but all the raises and lowers for the most part are parallel. So when you're going from an E to an A, say the 1 to the 4, um, you press you would press pedal to raise your 3 to the 4, and it'll raise both of your 3s to the 4. and you want to raise your 5 to the 6, you're going from the 1 to the 4, that'll raise both of your fifths to the 6. However, if you want one to raise and not the other one, then that's where you get into problems. So if you're going to have dissonance or more complex chords, a composer for the E ninth will have to be a little bit more creative on how they do that. Unfortunately, being creative means it's harder to play because you'd have to use, like, say, open strings, and you need some facility on the instrument to be able to kind of manage like an open string here, pushing your bar up there, something like that. I hear that sort of sound in a lot of ambient music because it's sweet. It's usually tuned in some sort of just intonation, so it's got that real sweetness. It's important to know the range, and it's important to know the number of voices. Say they're going to write a chord. I think it's important, if you're going to write something, if you can, to have a specific musician in mind so that you can communicate with them. And everything that I've played that's been written for me, and like I did played in the Mary Halverson octet, and all that was just written in notes. And Nate Woolley, his projects, the same thing. So what I did with them is that I would send them my copedant and explain, what that little diagram of the copedant, how that you know how that works, and I would say, this is my lowest note. These are my highest notes. Um, the composer needs to know that the higher notes, it's more difficult to play in tune because you have less and less and less space between notes, and you get high up on the neck. If you're playing a bar, you can't see it. The musician can't see it. So you get into some pretty strange territory there. Um, Practicing scales, going way, 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 way up the neck, helps with that, for the musicians. Um, Also, when you have things that are like in the hummingbird range, pitch wise, um, on a pedal steel, they don't sustain. Like you can like play on an organ or a guitar with whatever. It's very hard to make them sustain. Um, I would say learn what open notes, uh, that you can use. In other words, the steel player, if say I want to have, say, a low E flat or something like that, or C, and I'm playing something way up the neck, I'll move the bar over and hit that open bass note. So be aware of the combinations of that you can use. Um, Also, it's important to have a conversation with the musician, because something that you might write that, say, would be really easy on a guitar or a piano, uh, would be very difficult on the pedal steel, because there's so many ways to play it. And that's my tuning, which is a C6-9. I have 20 different places on the neck to play a middle C. And so which one of those do I use? Well, it depends on what the next note is, and the note after that, and the note after that. And so you go into that with each note that you play. So something that's easy on another instrument can be very tricky on the pedal steel. And plus, if the musician has never played that kind of passage before, they don't have it in their muscle memory, so it's harder for them to learn. At least it is for me. And also, some things that are really easy on pedal steel guitar to play are difficult or impossible on other instruments.
Like, what are some of those things that really like are idiomatic to the instrument that you think, like we know them as steel players, but like other people might not really other musicians might not know about all the cool things we can do that aren't insanely difficult, you know?
You've got the contrary motion, especially on the E ninth neck, and you know, you can play these big beautiful chords. They'll sustain for a long time. Um, different kinds of vibrato um, are also very easily done. Um, I find that there's a lot of, you know, what people would call extended techniques that can make for fascinating music on the pedal steel. Uh, and with composers, microtonalism for one. There's a musician in Austin, Bob Hoffnar, who's kind of worked extensively in that sort of thing. Like if you're playing like say a straight 1 2 straight sort of pentatonic kind of chord and holding the bar straight, say on your 15th fret, and you tilt the bar a little bit, you know, then all of a sudden it's almost like, you know, you can like a gamelan orchestra or sort of out of tune Paraguayan harp or something. Um, you can do shivers on the bar. You kind of go like this, or just uh, play a run like on upper strings and leave the bar down so that the lower strings will vibrate. Done in that way, uh, you can kind of sort of almost recall like, you know, some of those liggity, you know, those choral, you know, tone stacks. So in that way, the pedal steel is in a certain way, I think it's almost a bridge between a guitar and a piano. And you can play lower notes with a sustain and it can sound like a cello. Um, you can use a pencil instead of a metal bar, and it can sound like a banjo or like a coda. So there's just it's endless. There's all kinds of weird. Unfortunately, there's all kinds of weird challenges in that you can write someone can write a chord and it just can't be done with a certain pedal setup. And I run into that all the time, and I agonize over it. I'm trying to think of, you know, what about a steel guitar with 20 pedals, a heel toe setup, or something like that, or whatever. There's somebody coming out with a digital pedal steel where you'll be able to program your own pedal setup, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah, that's Alan, right? Alan
Mm,
Pagliari.
yeah,
I
yeah.
know him, and that's cool. And actually, Bob Hoffnar gave me my first lap steel lesson way back in Brooklyn.
Oh, did he? Yeah,
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 yeah, I know Bob. He's great.
yeah.
I venture to say you're the leader in this area, but I'm wondering who you think would be anyone else that people should listen to for ideas about how to write or.
We talked about Bob Hoffnar. He's definitely one. Dave Easley in New Orleans is brilliant. He played with Brian Blade in the 1990s. Um, there's a steel player in France, Lionel Wendling, who's also incredible, and he's really good at like sort of 60s sort of straight ahead jazz. You know, Wayne Shorter. He did an album of monk tunes, as did Mike Neer, who we both know. Um, Hal Merrill on the West Coast, I think in Seattle. Um, I would think of him. Christopher Wojtach is another one. It's kind of very, you know, kind of a free spirit on the instrument. Um, Probably Lucky Oceans. Um, Got a lot of these people are people who've been at your unconvention. So yeah, and then another steel player is Chaz Smith. You familiar with him?
I've heard that name a bunch, especially recently, but I don't think I've listened to him. No.
He went to Berkeley and studied composition. He was good friends with Harold Budd, the minimalist composer,
Hmm.
out in California. And in the 90s, I believe, he recorded some albums that he had written, um, of, I guess you would call it sort of minimalism kind of inspired music. In other words, this happens, and then 28.3 minutes later, this happens, and then they do this, that sort of thing, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
And he built pedal steel out of titanium, using titanium rods for something. So there's people like that out there.
I mean, there's so much more I'd love to talk to you about, but I guess I should just say like thank you so much for agreeing to meet and talk, and really hopeful that not only can we get you back at an convention someday, but that we can do more working and playing together, and also that all this stuff lifts up, and all those things is what we hope for you. So
Oh, thanks, Raphael.